Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good morning and hello my friends and my fans and my colleagues everywhere. To all clinicians and doctors who listen to me, this is Professor Dr. Tarek Ali. Today I will speak about the clinical aspects and some clinical tips regarding the autoimmune diseases. We all know that autoimmune diseases is a very broad spectrum of medical disorders, heterogeneous in nature, of different etiology, different pathogenesis, and different pathobiology, with different disease categories and with different and variable presentations, clinical presentations in practice. Autoimmune disease means that the body reacts against itself. That is, there is a problem in the immune system, so that the immune system does not recognize the self proteins as self. They recognize self proteins as foreign, and they react to the body proteins, causing what we call an immune-mediated inflammation. So it is an immune dysregulation with reaction of the body against itself, whether this is localized to a specific organ or tissue, or it is systemic, affecting more than two organs or systems in the body, or many of the body systems, including the organs and tissues. And in these immune-mediated or autoimmune diseases, various cells in the immune system are involved, including the T cells, the immunoglobulins, that is the antibodies, and most of the autoimmune diseases, they are of the type 3 hypersensitivity reaction, that there is what we call antigen-antibody complex formation with complement activation. So it is an antigen-antibody complement reaction. It is an antigen-antibody complement reaction between the antibody against some antigen in the tissue or organ, and then as a result of the antigen-antibody reaction, there will be what we call complement activation. And the result is what we call immune complex deposition. And this immune complex deposition will trigger the inflammatory cascade, which causes the inflammatory damage to the tissues, and later on to complications and sequelae. So most of these reactions is of the type 3 hypersensitivity reaction, the antigen-antibody complement reaction, or immune complex deposition with inflammatory cascade triggering. That's why these autoimmune diseases, they are either what we call the organ-specific autoimmune diseases, in which the body or the immune system reacts against the antigens of a single organ or tissue, in which the immune system reacts against a single organ or tissue. This is called organ-specific autoimmune diseases. Or, on the other hand, another group, which is the organ non-specific, in which the antibody, the immune system and the antibodies formed, they are formed against, and they are reacting against, and they are attacking antigens in different tissues and organs in the body non-specifically. It's not specific to a single organ or to a single tissue. And this is what we call the systemic autoimmune diseases. They are non-organ specific or organ non-specific autoimmune diseases. I will explain first what are the causes of the this phenomenon, this group of disorders, the autoimmune diseases, what makes the individual develops an autoimmune disease. Usually autoimmune diseases, they are multifactorial, as we say, that they are of various origins, and the exact cause of the autoimmunity or the exact cause of autoimmune diseases is not known exactly. But it is usually due to interaction between two groups of factors. Number one, genetic factors or hereditary factors. That's why such diseases usually run in families, and there is usually what we call familial clustering of autoimmune disease. That is, when you find one family have, or one person in the family have an autoimmune disease, there will be other people who might be susceptible to develop this disease same. So this is because of genetic factors. So there is what we call genetic factors. These genes are usually associated with the T cell receptors or immunoglobulins, or they are linked to or associated with what we call the human major histocompatibility complex, or the MHC, in which an important part can predict the susceptibility to autoimmune disease, which we call it the HLA, or the human leukocyte antigen, which is a classification on the cell surface of glycoproteins on the surface of lymphocytes and macrophages. So this HLA is an important marker for susceptibility of the individual to develop autoimmune disease, the HLA, which is part of the major histocompatibility complex. So the three groups of genes which are linked to autoimmune disease, they are associated with the T cell receptors. They are associated with the immunoglobulins, or which are secreted by the B cells, which are the antibodies, and number three, genes of the major histocompatibility complex, which are glycoproteins on the surface of lymphocytes and macrophages. These are the three major groups of genes which are associated with and linked with autoimmune diseases. Any family which have abnormality of these genes, they are liable to develop autoimmune disease, especially the organ non-specific autoimmune diseases, as systemic lupus, rheumatoid, and dermatitis, as I will mention now. So this is the first group of factors which are involved in the etiopathogenesis of autoimmune disease, the genetic or hereditary factors. And which groups of genes responsible? I already mentioned them. Number two, we come to what we call the acquired factors or the environmental factors. By the way, genetic factors, they are non-modifiable. You cannot change it. You cannot modify it in order to prevent or minimize the incidence and the prevalence of autoimmune diseases. The other group, which is the acquired or the environmental factors, is the one which is modifiable, because this might be the triggering factors of the immune reaction and of the autoimmune reaction in the body and the development of the autoimmune disease. The acquired factors, or what we call sometimes environmental factors, they are mostly either microorganisms, maybe the triggering factor of autoimmunity, especially some viruses and some bacteria. They might trigger autoimmunity. Many viruses can trigger autoimmunity, including Coxsackie virus, echovirus, cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus, herpes virus. These also hepatitis virus in some reports. So various viruses and different viruses are incriminated and blamed in the etiopathogenesis and in perpetuation of the autoimmune inflammatory process. So viruses and also some bacteria are blamed and involved in autoimmune disease pathogenesis. Maybe also other non-identified environmental toxin or foreign substance from the nature or from the environment, which are too much, and they might initiate the autoimmune process and or perpetuate the autoimmune process in the body tissues or organs. So bacteria and viruses may be among the environmental factors. Also drugs. There are some drugs which are involved in autoimmune diseases, especially the organ-specific autoimmune diseases, like, for example, procainamide, hydralazine, which are commonly involved and blamed in what we call drug-induced lupus erythematosus. The hydralazine and procainamide, also isoniazid, which is an anti-tuberculous drug, is one of the drugs causing autoimmune phenomena. Also alpha-methyl dopa, which is an antihypertensive, used commonly in the past, and still we use it in hypertensive pregnancy, the alpha-methyl dopa or the aldomet. The minocycline, also another antibiotic which can cause autoimmune disease, minocycline or minosin. Also sulfadiazine is it's a sulfonamide, which is among the drugs causing autoimmune disease. So these are all drugs, but the most common among them is the hydralazine and the procainamide and the quinidine and alpha-methyl dopa and some antibiotics. These drugs might be involved in autoimmune disease pathogenesis or etiopathogenesis. So we have to ask about drugs whenever we meet a case with an autoimmune disease, especially autoimmune disease which develops later on in life. They might not be primary autoimmune disease of pure genetic or hereditary background, but they might be related to acquired factors, especially to drug intake. Some drugs taken for another medical issue, and this drug perpetuated and caused started the autoimmune process. So these are all acquired factors, whether drugs or organisms or microorganisms or unidentified toxins from the environment. These may be also some hidden substances present in some foods, especially processed foods and artificial substances used with food preservation, etc. These are all hidden substances in the nature, in the food, which can cause autoimmune or trigger an autoimmune reaction and cause autoimmune disease. So this is the interplay of genetic and acquired factors in the etiopathogenesis of autoimmune diseases. That's why autoimmune disease usually is multifactorial. You find that there is an interplay or interaction of both genetic and environmental factors in the same individual, of variable nature and of variable degree of sharing in the etiopathogenesis and in initiation of the autoimmune disease. So it is usually multifactorial, or in many individuals with autoimmune disease, multifactorial. Also, we have not to forget the role of stress. Stress sometimes also play a role in the initiation and in propagation or the perpetuation of the autoimmune reaction in the body and the immune-mediated inflammation. Stress, and that's why there is a relation between, or there is a link between stress and some autoimmune diseases. For example, the relation between stress and the Graves' disease, which is an organ-specific thyroid disease. Graves' thyrotoxicosis is related to stress in some cases. Another example is the relation of stress to rheumatoid arthritis and rheumatoid arthritis exacerbations, which is an example of organ non-specific autoimmune disease. So stress might be related to either organ-specific or to non-organ-specific autoimmune diseases. So psychological factors might also play a role, maybe as a precipitating cause, rather than a predisposing cause. So we have predisposing, for example, hereditary change or some form of genetic abnormality, and then we get precipitating factors related to psychological stress, which initiate the autoimmune process. So this is the role of psychological stress in autoimmune disease, which should not be forgotten also, and which we should think about. There is a relation between the nervous system and the endocrine and the immune system, and this is what we call the neuroendocrine immune interaction. Neuroendocrine immune interaction. There is interaction between the nervous system, especially the higher levels of the central nervous system, and their effects on the endocrine system through the hypothalamus and the pituitary, the area of the diencephalon and the limbic system and its control on the pituitary axis, or what we call the neuroendocrine unit of the central neuroendocrine unit in the brain. Through this part of the brain, it will affect also the rest of other hormones and the immune system. So this is the relation, this is the axis, the neuro, the nervous system, endocrine, the central endocrine unit in the diencephalon, in the hypothalamus, immune system number 3. This tripartite system will explain the initiation of the body reacting against itself and the formation of immune complex mediated disease. So stress through the neuroendocrine immune interaction, stress. And then the number 4 is the role of hormones. We have not to forget this, especially if we know that most of the autoimmune diseases, whether organ-specific or organ-non-specific, lupus, rheumatoid, dermatomyositis, scleroderma, they are more common in women. Why? Maybe, of course, we should think about the hormonal changes as an underlying explanation for the high prevalence of autoimmune diseases in women rather than in men. It is in the ratio of 3 to 4 to 1. For every 3 to 4 women with autoimmune disease, there is 1 man developing autoimmune disease. So we have to link the possibility of hormonal changes, and of course it is evidence-based that hormonal changes might exacerbate as what happens, for example, in women with systemic lupus. They might get exacerbation of the autoimmune inflammatory reaction during periods of great hormone changes, premenstrual, also during pregnancy. So the fluctuations of hormones, I mean here the sex hormones, during the under physiological conditions especially, they might be related to the etiopathogenesis of autoimmune disease, so hormonal changes. That's why it is more common in women than in men, due to the nature of the hormonal profile in women in comparison with men. So the role of hormones, and this also confirms the what we call the endocrine immune interaction. The endocrine immune interaction, there is an interaction between the endocrine system and the immune system, and this may be under supervision of the or the process may start in the brain above, that will be now neuro. So it is the neuroendocrine immune interaction. So this is the how does the autoimmune disease start or develop, or what we call the etiology and the etiopathogenesis and the pathobiology of autoimmune disease. Genetic factors, acquired factors, viruses, bacteria, drugs, toxins from the environment, psychological stress, mental factors, hormonal changes related to sex hormones, especially, maybe to other also unidentified hormones, or it's rather complex, involving more than hormonal pathway. And also the relation between obesity and autoimmune disease. Obese females and obese people in particular, they are liable and they are susceptible to develop an autoimmune inflammatory disease. This is the pathobiology and the etiology of autoimmune diseases. In the next presentation, I will talk about the what are the different categories of autoimmune disease.